All right, should be good.
My board members, if we can just like, we have to do our official stuff, but if I can just kind of like start before we do that. Thanks all for coming. I don't have the mic. Can you hear me? I have been doing our Tournament of Eagles over at Sunset Ridge. If you have a Sunset Ridge kid, hopefully you'll hear about it today. There was a lot of yelling, so I may lose my voice. So I'm Ed Steng, if I haven't met you, superintendent here. This is technically our Parent Connections meeting, which if you've never been, what we typically try to do is I do some kind of presentation on some topic in the district, and it's really about getting dialogue going, hearing feedback from people about whatever the topic is. So tonight, we're combining that with talking about Middlefork capital improvement planning, something the board's been working on for over a year, I'd say now. Technically, since I have, if you don't know, board members here, Sam Dotzler, Charlie Pick, Sam Tiedemann, Jenny Damon, 4 board members, we have a quorum. So we do have to hold this as an official board meeting, so we have to call roll, take attendance, close it, all that kind of stuff, just so that we're legal. So I want to do that before we get started. The handout in your hand, there's a few of the slides. I think the main slides that I want you to be thinking about tonight is that I printed out for you. And then there's a handout for you, and it has 4 boxes in it. So as I'm talking tonight, I'd like you to be thinking about what's unclear about this, Ed. I just don't get it. I'm trying to condense a year and a half of work into like 15 minutes here. What's unclear? Write your notes down. What do you like about what I'm talking about here? And I'm going to talk about 3 different categories. How did we assess what the needs are in this district, in this building? What are the different scenarios or options we have for capital improvement? And what are financing resources that are available? So under any of those, say, oh, I like that you identified this need. I like that you talked about this financing option. I like this scenario. And then there's the next box. I would like to see, and it's kind of a nice way of framing the I don't like. I would really like to see you identify this as a need, and I don't see it in there, Ed. I'd like you to think about this as a possible capital improvement scenario, and I don't see it in there, Ed. I'd like to think about this as a financing option. I don't see it in there. And then the last bucket is just about being creative. We have been so close to this for a long time. What we always worry about is groupthink, and we're not thinking about creative solutions. So it's, have you thought about this? It's kind of a catch-all bucket, okay? So I'll do that in just a minute. First, we got to do our technical starting the board meeting. So, Mr. Dotzler.
All right, it is Thursday at 6:04, September 24th. Calling to order the board subcommittee of the Middlefork School Capital Improvement. Dr. Sandy, do you mind taking attendance?
Sure. Mr. Dotzler.
Here.
Mr. Pitt.
Here.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Here.
Thank you all.
Can I get a motion to approve the minutes of the September 19th, 2024 meeting?
So moved. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay.
All right, new business. Before we get started, any public comment? There'll be time for discussion as we get going on, but we always ask for public comment before we get started.
I think when you said the date, I think today's the 26th, instead of 24th.
Oh yeah, 26, sorry.
Okay, no, I just trying to help in the official record.
Yeah, thank you.
That's okay, so I'll make sure I remember
Yep.
that date.
All right.
All right, let's move to discussion.
All right, and don't feel like you have to wait to the end to ask some question. If something's unclear or you want to comment on something, please bring that up. But I'm just going to hit some highlights. Here's what I will be talking about, the needs assessment, and I want to be really transparent about that. That's a staff assessment of the needs. So I'm going to refer to White & Company. We have a couple folks right there, Princess Wave, from White & Company. There are architects that built that designed Sunset Ridge School. They also worked with us over the course of the past year to conduct a needs assessment. They met with groups of staff to identify what the needs of this building are. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the staff assessment or analysis of the facility needs. Then what White did was they took that data back, and given some constraints that I'll talk about with this property, they came up with a continuum of options. As it says there, from refresh, from doing what we call kind of in the industry a light and bright, I think is what you guys call it, refreshing finishes, interior, to rebuilding a whole new school, okay? And just laid out a continuum of options for the district to consider. Then we work with a private company, PMA Financial. They work with school districts all over the state of Illinois. And they look independently at our finances. They did the same thing when we built Sunset Ridge School. And they looked at what are our financial options to finance some kind of capital improvement. And I'll talk about the range of options with that. I'm going to get to brass tacks in the bottom, and then at some point there, Mr. Pick is going to talk about, this is the decision that you, via your Board of Education, has to make. Is, okay, the building needs some kind of improvement. What can we do in terms of financing? What can we afford without going to a referendum? And if you don't know that language, that means going to raise your property taxes. What can we do without doing that? And if you want to do more, what does that mean? The board's going to ultimately have to make that decision. And what we're trying to do is get them some feedback from people in this community as they try to make that decision. And then talk about throughout the process your reflections and input, okay? So let me jump right in. The buckets, as I kind of synthesize this data, about the needs in this building. And again, write down notes if something's unclear here, or just ask, Ed, I don't get that. They fall into three things: instructional space, infrastructure, and a general umbrella of safety and security. First thing is instructional space. And I'm going to show you some layouts of the building in a second here, but the need is to add more classrooms. And if you think about what the enrollment is of Middlefork School, right now we're at just over Gen 230, I think, somewhere in the 230s. An enrollment of 250 requires, at our class size, under 20 or less, about 13 to 14 core classrooms is what we need. And I'll get into in a second about what we have available. But we need more. Dedicated space for specials. That's art, music, Spanish, computer science. If you glance right over here, I'm pulling no punches. We did this here so you can see stuff like this. We had Spanish. We don't have a classroom for Spanish anymore. It goes on a cart because we had to take over the classroom for one of our core instructional classrooms. We don't have a music classroom anymore. That's our music classroom right there. Why? Because we had to take over the music classroom to have another core classroom. We do have a art room, and we have the computer science room as the maker space right off the library. And again, tonight, if you want to stick around, you want to walk around the building tour, Jen and I will be happy to do that. But we would like to add dedicated space for our specials classes. That's 4 classrooms. Dedicated space for special ed. I'm not going to get into too much detail about special education, but you should understand this, that there's 2 kinds of environments that we have for special education. One is what I call instructional. That's a classroom where kids are in that classroom more of the day, and then they push out into a general education classroom. In an instructional. In a resource environment, kids are in a general education classroom most of the day, and they get pulled out and get some kind of service in a resource classroom. And I've been here, this is my 20th year in District 29. The number of students when I first came here, and I used to work for a special education cooperative called NSSED True North, that served a lot of kids with more significant disabilities here. And 20 years ago, those kids that lived here went to classrooms in True North or NSSED. Now those kids are here, and yet we haven't added any more space for those. So we need dedicated space, both for instructional, kids that have more significant needs that are in self-contained classroom for most of the day, and pull-out classrooms for kids to get services. And then dedicated space for intervention and support service. This is a big continuum, but if you look right outside the door, you see these little dividers. That's no joke. That's what's set up down here. Down in the 2nd, 3rd grade vestibule, we have desks like that. So if a teacher, a reading specialist is working with a kid or a group of kids, that's where they're pulling them out to. ALP is working with a group of kids. That's where they're pulling them out to. Speech is working with a group of 3 or 4 kids. That's where they're pulling them out to. So dedicated spaces for intervention and support services. That's the instructional space category. The second is infrastructure. And this is, some of these things are known. Our HVAC system is about at its end of life, and it's a boiler system. I won't get too far into the weeds of a boiler system, but I think it's important you understand this. There is a boiler and there's a chiller. The boiler heats us in the winter and the chiller cools us in the summer. The two shall never meet or interact. You either have the boiler on or you have the chiller on. And so you're always deciding, do I want heat or air? And in those transition periods, it's always hot and cold. So the system's really inefficient. We're always heating water, even if we're not heating the building. And that system's at its end of the life. So even if we decide to do nothing else, we're gonna have to replace that boiler in the next, where's Tom?
Right here.
5-ish years?
Yes.
5 to 7 years? That's gotta come out. Aging features. And you can just look around this place. The roof, the windows, the doors, the canopy. Quite honestly, I'm embarrassed when I walk in the front of this school and I look at that canopy. The fascia, ceiling tile, lighting, all those things need updating and repair. The playground equipment that you see out there is also at about its end of life. Not only is it end of life, but as we're taking more kids in here that have accessibility issues, they can't even access the wood chips, a kid in a wheelchair. And then on top of that, we're up against a park where people walk through all day long. Where last year, I have no problem saying this. Last year I had to call the police because somebody from another town who's playing pickleball feels they're entitled to come by and talk to kids on a playground because it's their First Amendment right. That's no joke. No joke. That's the security around our playground. So our playground's at its end of life, it's not accessible, and it presents a big security risk for our kids that are out back there. Staff restrooms, so we've added staff to this building. We have 4 restrooms. And I'll say, being a guy here, I don't fight, I hold it and go to Sunset Ranch. There's not enough restrooms for the staff here. Storage space. They never have enough storage space, and I put a question mark here. This has been an ongoing issue. I won't get into the structure of this collaboration with the Park District, but that gym was built as an addition. District 29 is what's called the fee simple owner. That means we own the gym, but we have an intergovernmental agreement where during the day it's ours, at night they get to use it. But we own it. If something breaks, we pay for it. It's never had air conditioning. If you've ever been in there for a concert, you probably know what that's like, and some people want air conditioning considered in there, okay? That's infrastructure. Safety and security. I don't like getting into too many details about safety and security. I'm really proud of the safety and security features that are built into Sunset Ridge. Incredible features. It was built from public to most private, meaning you walk in the most public areas, and then it gets more private to the classroom areas, the most private. And there are systems in place to divide that building in case of an emergency to keep people away from the public areas to the private areas. And this building has no features like that. It has no layout design like that. So there's a lot of access controls and movement barriers that we don't have in this building, aside from enhanced safety and security features, whether that's reinforced glass, automatic gates that might drop out of the ceiling in case you need that in an emergency. This building has none of those things. In a nutshell, those are the needs. Have I missed anything, John?
No.
Please, while I take a drink really quickly. Have I missed anything? And please, Tom, any board members that have been in these meetings, have I missed any of the needs? Okay. So, a thinking point right now. If there's something that's unclear so far, write that down. Ed, I'm not clear on this. Or there's some need that you see as a parent that I haven't talked about. You say, well, what about this need? Write that down. I would like to see you address this need. Okay? So why, and it's not important why I didn't put these out in your handouts, because these designs are not important that you know all 3 of these designs. When we built Sunset Ridge, Tom and I went through, 52 designs? White finally got tired of seeing us down there and said, no more designs. What they gave us is concepts. And I want you to understand the continuum of concepts here, from refresh to rebuild. So I'm going to walk you through some scenarios and talk to you about the pricing. And in those scenarios, what you're going to see is a refresh scenario kind of down here, and then a scenario that builds a little addition down by the 3rd grade wing, a scenario that doubles that and has 2 additions, a scenario that redoes our gym so it separates it totally from the Park District, and then down here you have, hey, why don't you just build a new school? That's the last scenario. I'm going to walk you through those things, okay? The first thing is understand there's some limitations here. We can't just do what we want because of property lines, and there's a flood zone. On this chart, this little picture here, this dashed line is our property line. You may not realize, as a parent here, that our property line goes right through the gym. It literally does. And this playground, that's our kindergarten playground, is not on our property. That's the Park District's property, because the property line goes right through there. So, excuse me, we have the property line issue, but probably even a bigger issue is this flood zone. And what we really want to do is stay out of the flood zone. Once you get into there, that we're spending money on water mitigation, is that what you're calling it, essentially? Dealing with that, we're spending money on that versus anything else. So what White came back and said, look, you got some options here. If you want some expansion for more classrooms, you got an area here by the front entrance. You got this area in back by the playground that's off the flood zone. And you got a little bit of an area down here by the second, third grade entrance. Okay? Those are your areas to work with. So the three designs that White came up with. The reason I highlight these circles around here is not even the dollar amount, but understand that in this basic solution is the refresh option. They have money in here for exterior improvements, interior improvements, but there's $0. There's no new construction in this plan. It's just refresh the facade, what you have. There's some money for classroom furniture and technology, but there's no playground, there's no kitchen equipment. And the bottom line on this is you're looking at 12 on the high end. You can go from the low end, I go to the high end, 12.6 million to refresh the building. Plus your HVAC is another $500,000. It's about $13.1 million just to refresh what we have. We're not adding a square footage of space, not adding any more classrooms, anything, just refresh. That's the option one, or scenario 0.5. Your scenario one finally starts to look at if you want to expand your footprint. And so it has those same costs of refresh, but under new construction, it adds about $3 million of new construction. And in this scenario, they have an expansion of that third grade wing down at the end of the hallway. And there's a little alcove here that exits out from first grade to the playground. And the plan would be some kind of an expansion here and fill this in. That would, to the tune of about $3 million in addition to the infrastructure upgrades. And scrolling all the way down, 18.3, and then if you want the extra HVAC for another $500,000, you're looking at about, $18.8 million to do a small addition. The reason I say don't get too caught up on this is because I think we could flex. Is it best to do an addition down here? Is it best to do an addition here? Is it best to do, where is it best? But this is calculated based on square footage, correct? So they're saying if you want to add this amount of square footage, this is about what it gets you to, about $18.8 million. If you want to double that, you like that idea, but that's not enough space, we could do that, create a 2-3 community and a kindergarten first grade community, excuse me, and redo our kindergarten rooms to get some office space down here and separate the building from a little bit more public to more private with a performing arts wing. And then you also move a new playground here. What you're looking at is about 24.9 plus another $500,000, $25.4 million to do that scenario. If you really want to separate off ourselves, and what this really does, this gym thing, separates us from the Park District, excuse me. Although I love our partnership with the Park District, it's an incredible vulnerability. We have people coming in and out of that Park District all day long. And that Park District is connected to our gym right here, and it's connected to this room right around that corner. And their solution here is buildings, so our school is totally separate from the Park District. We have our own gym, everything is separate. That's what you're looking at, in the 34 million plus another half, $34.5 million to do that. At that point, you gotta say, wait, how much does a new school cost? And the rough back of the envelope was around 45-ish million. You got a question?
What did the existing gym that you said the school owns then be purchased by Park District?
I don't know what would happen. I think in that scenario, yeah, the Park District, they could probably turn that into pickleball courts and it'd be rented out all winter long, is what I would imagine. And Mr. Payne would have all the pickleboard paddles for him, I know you would. So I don't know what would happen. But then the last scenario that I don't have on here is just that you build a new building and it's about 45. So then what's on your sheet in terms of your handouts? Another one of these, the things that I think is really important for you to walk away as a community member is understand the needs. That's what I talked about here. There's some more detail there. What are the specials rooms? It lists them. What are the small group rooms? It lists them. What are the offices? It lists them. Then goes through each one of the scenarios and says, in your refresh option, well, if you do that, you're still going to be short special ed classroom, 2 specials rooms, 1 small group room, 1 office. You're not touching the playground, etc. You can read that on your own. I don't need to dive into all that with you. If you do scenario 1, you can see what needs are met and not. Scenario 2, scenario 3. Make sense what that is? So then the next question is, what can we afford without a referendum? And there's a couple levers. This is where things can get really complicated. You're incredibly fortunate to have this guy right here. And if you don't know, we built that $29 million building down the street without raising your taxes. We have the philosophy that we collect money, it's sort of like our paycheck from your taxes. And just like I have a mortgage, I have car payments, I have kids in college, it's how we run the district. We have a mortgage on that building. Started in 2016, it's a 20-year mortgage, goes to 2036, it's about $1.3 million a year, which runs out to somewhere in the $11,000 a month range. So we're going to talk about that loan down here in a second. There's 3 levers we can touch to say what can we afford. First thing is called debt service. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tom. Debt service in a nutshell is this. State law allows us to take a certain percentage of our tax proceeds and put it towards debt. I think it was 1976, somewhere in the mid-70s, the state went like this. Okay, you have this much in loan, here's how much your maximum debt service. And they set a limit for every school district around the state based on how much they had in debt in 1976. It makes no sense, but there's a cap on how much loan you can have, how much money you can take out of debt service. Our cap allows up to $4.7 million for us to use that. Okay? So we can get 4.7 up to out of debt service. We also have a fund balance. If you're not familiar with a fund balance, it's a bank account. And I think we have a bank account for 3 reasons. Tom, tell me if I'm wrong on any of these. One is just like my paycheck, I got bills that come in all the time, but I only get paid twice a month. So I gotta have money in the bank to pay the bills before I get the next check, right? So you have a bank account so that you can afford to pay your staff costs and all your money until we only get proceeds twice a year from taxes. In September and June?
August and March.
August and March. We get paid twice a year. So we gotta have money in the bank to be able to pay our bills. That's what the fund balance is about, 1. Number 2, the fund balance is about an emergency. Something breaks bad, how are you gonna pay for it? I can't come to you and say, you know what, the HVAC broke down. Mr. Payne, I need a couple bucks, can you give it to me? I gotta have money in the bank to pay for it. So that's the second reason we have a fund balance. The third reason we have a fund balance is planned capital projects. So the district levies the maximum amount it's allowed to levy, it saves money up, and then it spends that money to make improvements in the school district. So we have money in the bank called our fund balance. The board's looked at that. PMA, our independent financial company, has looked at that, and the board believes we could take up to $7 million out of our bank account, out of our fund balance. Well, Ed, how'd they get $7 million? Here's how they got to that, and Mr. Pick's going to talk about this in just a second too. That brings our bank account down to a fund balance of 48%. That percentage is based on a year. So if you have 100% fund balance, you can pay all your bills for a full year. If you have 50%, you can pay all your bills for a half a year. So the board says, well, gosh, that would bring our fund balance down to 48.6%. Okay, we feel good about that. The Illinois State Board of Education has a target of have a fund balance of at least 25% to earn recognition status. That means they think, okay, you're in good shape. So 48% is well above where the state's at. The range of public school districts across this state, their fund balance ranges from 10% to well over 100%. There's no like standard, it's all over the place. The District 29 Board of Education has a policy on fund balance. It says we will have a fund balance that's at least 40%. We drop below 40%, the board's gotta sit down, sharpen their pencil, we gotta start making some cuts, doing something. Because there's a structural problem. And that 48% is above the 40%. That leaves us approximately $8 million in our bank account. That's what that would leave as a balance if we took 7 out after the withdrawal. And then Mr. Bierhai and PMA have looked at how quickly does our fund balance recover. It quickly goes from that 48.6% back up to 69% and then starts growing again. So the board feels like, hey, we're good with that $7 billion. Well, I shouldn't say the board. Correct. What the board did was ask a subcommittee of board members to look at this topic. And they're coming back on August 8th with a recommendation, correct? Yeah, or I'm sorry, October. Yeah, I said August. And in our subcommittee, that's what we talked about, but I want to be really clear, the board hasn't approved that to that. So I want to go back to the capital lease certificates. The way we built Sunset Ridge, I told you we took a mortgage. 20-year mortgage, $1.3 million a year, and that's what we pay. What we talked about as a subcommittee is refinancing our existing, if we refinanced our existing mortgage over there, like refinancing your house. And we added an additional $200,000 to our mortgage payment each year. That would mean our approximate mortgage payment is 1.5 to 1.3 plus 2, 1.5 million a year for 20 more years. We're refinancing. This mortgage is done in 2036. Under this, the board chose to do this, we're refinancing that, and it's going to go till 2046. That would result, we could do that up to we could do $200,000 a year more out of our operating expenses, and refinance that would capture up to another $9.3 million. If we pulled all these levers, maxed them all out, total proceeds would be about $21 million. Okay? I want to pause there and say, Mr. Pick or Mr. Dotzer, would you, on behalf of the board, like to talk about, any of, I think this financing is really important. Would you like to just make some comments and I can get some drink?
So my name is Charlie Pick. I'm on the Board of Education. I am on the subcommittee with fellow board members Sam and Dr. Stang and other administrators and staff. Thank you for summarizing the work to date. We've been doing a lot behind the scenes, and we're just getting started. This is you're in the early. Believe it or not, it sounds like we're down the road. This is really the very early stages, and it's important to bring the community in to this process. I wanted to say a few words about this very important work. Our community has grown over the years, as have the demands on our Middlefork building. Not only do we need more classroom space, but we need the kinds of meeting office and collaborative spaces that meet the needs of today's educational environment. Not just more, but better and flexible. Our committee ultimately is tasked with making recommendations to the Board of Education. That's what the subcommittee does. On this critical effort, both in terms of scope, which Dr. Stang has shown you some scope options, and budget, which he just touched on very briefly. From a board perspective, I wanted to reinforce some themes that Dr. Stang alluded to, but really from a board perspective, just make sure that these hit home with the community. First and foremost, this is an inclusive and iterative process, even at this very early juncture in our planning process, it is critical to seek feedback and input from the community at large. Because we serve not only parents of kids in the district, but also the taxpayer. This is a taxpayer-funded endeavor. So we serve all of our constituents. We want as much input as we can get when we're spending this kind of money. While the committee does seek to make project scope recommendations to the board, community input at this stage is not only welcome, but it is essential. The last thing we ever want to hear down the road, and I'm sure you've all read articles and heard some buzz in social media and so forth about other communities, other school districts undergoing this kind of process, whether it's New Trier or Avoca or Evanston, Skokie. This is a hot topic. The last thing you want to hear is that the community felt excluded or not heard during the process, and that's really important to the board. All of our committee meetings are structured as open meetings, so anybody can come anytime and make comment, and we encourage that participation. The other key point is about the money. Okay, we take our fiscal responsibility to the district and the taxpayer extremely seriously. It's good to have an ambitious plan, which we do for Middlefork, but any plan has to balance the ambition with fiscal discipline. The district is in strong financial shape thanks to a growing tax base, solid stewardship by district administration, including Tom Beerheide, and good board fiscal policy. The board has really tried to pay close attention to that. We run at an operating surplus, so we bring in more revenue than we spend in expenses every year. And our fund balance, which you alluded to, which is again, a percentage, your savings account essentially, as a percentage of your annual expenses. So our fund balance is like 91%. We're projected to be 91% at the end of the school year, which is super strong. You know, the state minimum is 25. Our policy says 40. We're at 91, which is fantastic. So that gives us the ability to draw funds for doing these kinds of capital projects. But how much is enough? How much is too much? How much is too little? We have comments sometimes from the community. What are you sitting on all this money for? You're at 91%. What are you just collecting interest? You should be putting that money to work and not banking it. Well, you have to build it up because there are projects like this. So I'm very, we as a board are very relieved and happy that we've built this fund balance and we can put it to work. But that said, we need to keep these things in mind. So as we approach budgeting for Middlefork, we are mindful of cash flow, our operating budget, and fund balance. So our goals for this project are twofold. Number one, fund balance spending up to $7 million. That's the top. Why is that? Because that brings our fund balance from about 91 down to about 49%. Okay, why aren't we comfortable going down to 25 if that's the state minimum? Because there's rainy days. There's unforeseen expenditures. There are shifts in revenues that we can't always foresee. Not that it's expected, but we have to be prepared for a rainy day. That's fiscally responsible. So that's obviously up to $7 million and about 49%. And this 49%, when we get to that, because we run at a surplus, it should rebuild, right? So we get to rebuild, so we put away money for the next rainy day, because in business, there's always a rainy day. In school districts, there's always a rainy day. The second thing is that we don't want to put the district in a negative cash flow situation. So right now we run a surplus. We can very easily run up the debt service levy by taking $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 out of that surplus that we have now and just put it towards more debt. But as we project out over a number of years, that's too big of a hit to our operating budget. We don't want to do that. So our goal here with whatever we put towards debt service out of our current operating budget still keeps us in the land of surplus. That's really important. It might be a small surplus when we really get down to it and hit it in year one, year two, when we spend all this money, but the cash flow is designed to stay neutral or positive. So the district's financial strength is part of what makes District 29 competitive and attractive to new residents, and we don't take that strength for granted, even as we improve Middlefork to meet the high standards of the community. So thank you for your partnership, for your support, and for your involvement as we plan this exciting project. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Pitt. To kind of wrap this up before I come to your feedback, is this slide. So what I've tried to do is lay out from refresh, the 3 scenarios, and building a new school. What's our financing options? What are the levers we can pull? And so you can see this. If we just did the refresh, the cost was around $13 million. We maximize our debt service. We take that maximum amount of fund balance and refinancing some of our debt to only capture $1.4 million. We can pay for that refresh. Not ask for a referendum, not ask for any more money from taxpayers. If you want to go to scenario 1, and remember, scenario 1 is that like addition on the third, somewhere, one addition on the third grade end, filling in the little alcove. You maximize your debt, fund balance, you refinance your existing loan over there, and increase your mortgage payment each year by $200,000. You can capture that, $9.3 million. You don't need any additional money from taxpayers to take care of that scenario 1. You can do it. If you want to go to scenario 2, that's 25 and a half roughly million. We could do all those same things, but you're still about $4.5 million short. You can't do it. So you're either selling cookies, bake sale, or you're looking at some kind of donation or property tax referendum to capture that $4.4 million. If you want to go to scenario 3 at 34.5, all those strings, and you need to come up with another 13.6. If you want the full month, you want the new school at 45.5, you're going to have to do something for the tune of nearly $25 million. That's what's before the board. And again, I think it's really, really important. I don't want anybody walking out here going to their neighbor and saying, here's what they're doing. Because the board hasn't decided yet. We're at a subcommittee level on October 8th. There's a finance facility committee right before our regular board meeting where this subcommittee will come back and say, here's what we're thinking. It's not even done then. I don't want to give the impression that August 8th is my guess is there'll be some discussion at that meeting and probably some more community input. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people here. You know, that we need some more community input before I would think this board, Mr. Pick.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one comment to that train of thought. So our objective here, in terms of the fiscal responsibility part, is to see how many of our needs can we meet with minimal financial impact to the district. So we have the wish list that he showed you of all the needs in each scenario, and if we can get to most of them, so maybe scenario 1 it solves most of our problems, but not all. Maybe there's a 1.1 or a 1.2, a little bit of a kick out to scenario 1. It spends a little bit more money, but still keeps us within our no tax referendum, less than $7 million fund balance spend, keeping our budget surplus intact. How do we get to a scenario that solves most of our problems, because you can't always solve all of them, but solves most of our problems and then avoids those financial pitfalls?
Yeah. So then, what I'd like to do, and I understand, those of you that don't know, I'm a psychologist, so I think everything is a psychologist. And in a group like this, you don't want to dare speak up. You guys gonna, someone's gonna post tonight. This is what Brent Bain thinks about Middlefork School. What I'll say is I am recording this presentation just so that I can record this presentation, then push it out to the masses with that same sheet that you have. But anything from here on out, this feedback, is not going to be like recorded and posted out there. But I'm hoping that we could have like a little bit of conversation. The first thing is the easy thing. I've talked about a lot of stuff tonight. There's a lot of jargon in this. Is there something that's unclear to you right away? You're like, I'm not so sure. This is unclear to me that I might be able to clear up. Anything you're thinking? Yeah.
I'm gonna jump right in. So with Sunset Ridge, you said you did that without asking for a referendum, but the number was way higher than what we're hearing here. At least I remember that. Yeah. How did that happen, and why were you in the situation to be able to do that?
Well, yeah, the cost escalation. I mean, that was a roughly $29.5 million. Yeah, and we raised, I think we had donated about $1.5 million, somewhere in that range. And the rest, we took some out of fund balance, and the rest we did this loan. We created a loan. Now, with cost escalation, you're getting less square footage. What was the square footage estimate on a new school? Do you remember, Steve? Yeah, so less than Sunset Ridge at $45 million.
And then your map looks terrible. Looks like we're on a terrible piece of land here. Is there any consideration on just getting a new piece of land?
I think that's in the bottom one. Has the district, I'm serious. I'm not joking, Brent.
Yeah.
That's like the creative thing. We have been talking about, there's that field over at Sunset Ridge. What if we built on that field instead of here? I don't know if that's possible. I have no idea. But I think that's the kind of creative thing. Have you thought about blank? I don't know where else there's property in Northfield other than over at Sunset Ridge. I don't know if that's big enough. I don't know if we have the water. There's a whole lot I don't know, but I appreciate that. Have you thought about something else other than this space? Thank you for sharing that.
And then third, if we build a new school, does it kick ass like Sunset Ridge does, or is it just a mediocre-ish school? 'Cause I think the community is very proud of Sunset Ridge.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
And the way in which we built it, the green initiative that's involved in it. Every time we go in as parents, I know I'm super stoked that my kid is going to Sunset Ridge, the way the facility was created. is it that caliber that we're looking at when we
Nothing
are saying new
less.
school?
Yeah. I think one of the things I didn't talk about here that I'm really concerned about is we had an incredible gift at Sunset Ridge. If you weren't around, we had the fields where the current school is, the current school was where our fields were, and the fields are where the old school, so we built a new school there while the kids were in school. Then we knocked it down, then we made the fields next door. What do you do here? And I'm concerned about interruption to instructional environment, how long it takes to shut down third grade to do that, or this, and where are you gonna put these kids at? So I'm worried about that interruption, and I'm worried also about, it's, forgive my term, wasted cost. That if we're buying portable classrooms, what did you call them? Modular units. If you're buying modular units for kids to stay in at $250 roughly a piece, we're spending money on something that's not going into the school. So I'm concerned about those things in this environment. I think we all are. We want to maximize the money that's going into the build, not for portables, not for water mitigation. We want to disrupt the classroom environment as little as possible, but it's not the same scenario that it was across the street there.
On that note, are there any time estimates for these different scenarios? I mean, obviously, rebuilding the school, it's gonna take a lot longer than if you're doing a refresh, but are there time estimates?
I'll turn to the architects. Anything you want to say, Stephanie or Steve?
I think any of the three scenarios would definitely extend over 2 summers and a school year, so I think we could loosely say like 18 months of construction time for any scenario.
Great question. Yeah.
I see where you talked about like the desired spaces and kind of did it for each scenario. What about the security with respect to the park district? Because I don't see that in any of the options, and I'm just wondering, is that,
Yeah, and
where is that volume in terms of priority among the cost?
yeah, I really appreciate you bringing that up. It's such a difficult one to talk about
Well, I don't want to.
because I can't talk about, what is the security thing that we're really talking about. I think that's why I put it into 2 buckets. There's security that's created by the layout of your facility. And that's when I talk about most public to most private at Sunset Ridge. And then there's features within Sunset Ridge that I don't want to talk about all those. But there are separations from different segments in the school. There are reinforced structures in the building. There are communication systems in that building that don't exist here. And those are a big priority. And I think if you say, you know what, I would like as a parent, I'm not want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like what you're saying is, I would like as a parent to see the prioritization of security as you're thinking about the new building. And I think the board will get that message.
I'm curious, where is Park District in all of this? Are they aware that we're having these conversations? Are they involved at the subcommittee level?
You need a big drink before that. Wow, Jeannie. We did meet with the Park District and talked about particularly that Middlefork playground. I will say to you, it's one of my big concerns that we have a playground of our most vulnerable kids that are right out there exposed to Willow Road. We don't own that property. And we did talk with the Park District about what their capital needs were and what ours were, and if there was any opportunity to partner together. Unfortunately, they don't have debt service, fund balance. They don't have the things that we have, the leverage to pull. So my understanding is they don't have the funds to be able to commit to some capital improvement at this time.
What are the projected enrollment census numbers?
Yeah.
For like 5, 10, 15 years?
Yeah, so we, it's a great question. We, along with all the districts in the New Trier Township, use a demographer that looks at predicting enrollment. We switched demographers recently with all the township districts, because the last one would give you here's a high projection, here's a low projection, here's a middle projection, so you basically couldn't lose. They had everyone. What I've seen, what I've been reporting, and you can see this in any of the board agendas, is our enrollment's been going up, 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 up. Mr. Tiedemann is quite the accomplished statistician, can I say? Yeah. And did his own analysis, and I won't put words in your mouth, and brought it to the committee of our enrollment projections, and your analysis suggested
My analysis suggested that our enrollment at Middlefork will probably continue to grow over the next 5 or 10 years, stabilize, and then maybe go down. Our school district is very generational. A lot of Northfield was built in the 1940s and 50s for returning war veterans. And so enrollment surged in the 60s with the baby boom, went way down. When millennials came back, the children of the baby boom, it went up and then it went down. And now the millennials' children are starting to show up, and we're still growing with that. And Middlefork, of course, sees that growth first. And so I think that we will grow probably 5 or 10% more over the next 5 or 10 years, and our district will probably peak in enrollment in the mid-2030s. And then it should be maybe a little bit of decline, but pretty stable after that.
And that's how I put that 250 in there, is that we're a little bit short right now, classrooms at 230. So we want to be thinking about preparing ourselves for 250 kids.
What year was Middlefork built again?
Original occupancy was taken in 1959. And then in the 60s, there were 2 additions that were done. One down at the end of 3rd grade, and I believe the kindergarten addition. These were 2 additions. Then in it was right before 2000 is when this gym was built. But that didn't really, other than it took this, which served as the gym and the cafeteria. Now it's only the cafeteria.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah,
So as you go up in the scenarios, you kind of built upon the refresh number, right? You kept the refresh number and then you added on. But as you expand the school, do you foresee things like the HVAC having to be bigger or have more cost to it, or is that built in?
That's built into the cost of the construction.
Great question.
Are we asking for a lot of money from the community with the new school? Is that a lot of money? Is $45 million a lot of money for the city of our site?
I guess I just pause first that I'm not asking for that, or we're not asking for that at this point. Is 45 million? I think if what you're saying is, you know what, I would really like to see, what's 4.4 million on a EAV of 100,000? What's the tax increase?
Correct.
What is 13.6? What is that? So that you can go back to the community and say, okay, you know what, I may have more of a pallet for 4.4 if I see that makes my tax bill go up $50. But if you're talking 15,000, my pallet might not be there. So if you're saying, I would like to see, I think it would be helpful for citizens to see, what would that be?
I think it would be good for us to see that for the citizens, but also comparative to what other communities have asked for their schools.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Like both. Are we asking our community to give a lot more than neighboring communities?
Yeah, I
right?
see what you're
And
saying.
how much more? And then how much is each family income level, whatever we
Yeah.
look at there?
Yeah.
Like how much is it really going to hurt the community? How often do those get approved or not approved? What's wrong with asking? Like a bunch of questions in and around the referendum side.
No, I appreciate
I
it.
still believe that the land is terrible here. We're borrowing from the park district, we're up against a flood area, and we have a giant field sitting at Sunset Ridge where we can make an awesome campus of the grade school and the junior high together, or whatever you guys call it.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Thank you.
I don't know if Sunset Ridge.
How many tax-paying households are there in our school district? 1,800, I think? Something.
I'm impressed if you know the answer to that, Mr. Tiedemann. You've even rose to another level in my book.
So divide those numbers by 1,800, and that's what you could expect per household. So for the new school, that would be, 14,000 per household average or something like that.
So
Yeah,
the
I-
school is 14
for
grand
12
more.
Well, yeah, I just want to be careful because that's based on,
Yeah.
and I'm sorry, I said EAV so quickly and then I'm like, you know what, Ed, they probably don't even know what you're talking about. Equalized assessed valuation is like the worth of your property. So your property tax isn't flat for everybody. It's based on the value of your property. So I think it would be much better, and I appreciate you bringing that up, to have us go back. PMA could do that, right?
We have a calculator that we will provide to any of the residents where they could enter their EAV and it would calculate based on what we determine the referendum amount to be.
Yeah.
The resident could use that calculator to, calculate it.
Yeah, what would the cost be? And that would be helpful, I think, for people to see, yes.
So would that then be something that taxpayers can vote on?
If you go to a referendum, that is, it has to go on a ballot.
Still fail.
And then that could fail, yeah. You can ask for it, doesn't mean it'll pass. You see what happened in Avoca,
Yeah, well,
right next door.
After $89 million referendum, and it got turned down basically 76% to 24% opposing it.
Yeah.
And they were asking for 89 million, and there was a huge groundswell of opposition based on what they wanted to try to do as far as closing the Avoca West
Yeah.
campus.
Yep.
And moving it over by Marine
Absolutely.
Murphy. So the other thing you gotta remember too is, right now you have this property here and you have Sunset Ridge. By having the properties divided and not having everyone at one place for pickup, drop off, traffic congestion, everything else, you have to look at that as well. And that's a huge concern because right now, anytime during the day when you look at in the afternoon for pickup and drop
Oh,
off,
yeah.
Willow Road backs up because of how many people are going to Sunset Ridge. Now you know,
Double that.
how many families
Yeah.
are going to be picking up at that same site. So the traffic at that intersection in that area probably wouldn't be conducive, especially since Sunset Ridge is only one lane in each direction, and then the Willow Road back. So, you know, yeah, there's some issues with the property here, but there are other ways of getting around that. Sometimes we can talk about putting a second floor on, so you condense, you know, the footprint by putting a second floor on, and then you don't have that issue with the flooding. And you also keep this campus, you know, separate from the other one, and also you keep it centrally located. The families that live around here, a lot of them can walk here, can ride their bikes, you know, the pickup and drop off is a lot easier. So those are other dynamics
Absolutely.
that you have to also think of when you look at, you know, the other potentials.
And why did the architects go out instead of up?
So we actually looked at a scenario where we built a new addition that was a two-story addition at the north end of the building. And that was something that had its own kind of challenges in and of itself because of circulation and kind of isolating I think it was third grade classrooms at that upper level. The way to do that on an existing structure would be to build a new addition to do so. Building a second story on an existing structure, the foundations, the walls are not designed to carry the load, the roof, all of that. In order to do it, you basically have to rebuild it all and kind of start over. So the way to think about it would be to demolish a portion of the building and build a two-story structure in that area instead.
And then school code, correct me if I'm wrong, limits, K-2 kids from going on the second floor, is that correct?
Correct.
So you can only have third graders on the second floor of a school building.
But I think those are great things to, you know, and I was gonna ask if you don't mind if, you know, if you want to turn in those sheets, or you don't have to, you can send this later, but these are the what-ifs that I'd love, you know, people to, it's not that we haven't thought of it, and haven't talked to the architects about a second story here, but what if? What if?
And then the other big one if is third grade moving to Sunset Ridge. Like, is there a limit that we finally draw on how young we keep pushing kids to Sunset Ridge? Or
Good question, one that we've talked about too.
Okay.
Right now, with the big fourth grade section that went over, we recaptured one of our flexible rooms to offer 4 fourth grade classrooms. So it's pretty tight right now. Would it be possible even, I think 2 options in a short term? We did construction, could we bring third grade over? Brings its own challenges. Wait, now my kid lost third grade, the year that they're the, you know, big man on campus is gone.
Hey, and what year what school year would be disrupted?
I think that all depends on what scenario we choose and how we choose to do that, you know, and again, what they've tried to do is lay out things that could be phased. So you could do something and phase it to maximize your summer use. Without knowing what scenario we're doing, I don't want to say, oh, we can get this done in the summer, but I think it all depends on what's the extent, what's the phasing plan to do that, what's your appetite for doing this over a couple years so that you bring down disruption to the academic environment, but you also may bring down the cost of, what'd you call them? Modular units. You know, we've thought about, what if you took this cafeteria and you turned it into 4 classrooms for a year? You know, instead of having modular units. You know, all these ideas, I think, things that have to be brainstormed for how do you balance the desire to have something new with the desire to not interrupt instructional time and to not spend money on modular. I just can't do it. Modular units. Yeah. Other questions?
Sorry, I got kind of an unfair
An idea that seems very logical to us, and again, this is all very tentative and none of this is carved in stone yet, but would be to find an option that was sort of between scenario 1 and scenario 2 that could do a little bit more targeted job of checking off some of the things on that list that you all have, that would be right at that 21 million mark that we could do without a referendum. And we feel like that would get us what we need without needing to go into taxpayers' pockets. And that's something that sort of makes sense to us. Again, all this is still up for discussion, but that is sort of a consensus that our subcommittee is reaching.
And then my other question is, and maybe it's more you guys, but do the costs include a refresh of furniture as well? Are we gonna have beautiful buildings all over?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to show on each one of these. You can't see, and I didn't print it out for you, but down here it says allowances. There's roughly $2 million for furniture, $220,000 for new technology, and that's scenario 3, scenario 2, scenario 1 all have furniture and technology upgrades in them.
One thing we've spent a fair amount of time talking about is there's an element of squeezing the balloon here, and so, could we pull down on fund balance to maybe get to the next scenario? We certainly could do that and drop it down to a lower number, but then what happens if we have a problem happen at Sunset Bridge or something like that? So we're really trying to do this in a way where we're not dropping our fund balance down, and we're not going to referendum to ask for that extra $5,000 to $20,000. But again, we're so early in the stage. If the community comes back overwhelmingly and says, no, go to referendum, it's going to pass here in Northfield, that's a different scenario. Or if they say, listen, I think 46% fund balance is way too low, 90% is great, because it's really safe. Those are all factors that we want to look at and consider. When we came up with the numbers we have here, those are numbers we were working with Tom and everyone say, okay, 46% is really safe. If there's a catastrophic breakdown of the system, we can cover that. We still have enough operating revenue as surplus that things are going according to plan. We're going to build that back up. We can get 90% of what we're looking for without having to sort of do some of those things, and that's really what we're trying to look at. But again, this is just at the subcommittee level. We've all talked to the board at large one-on-one, and there's some energy in that direction. But again, it really comes down to what the community wants, and I think as Charlie pointed out, that the parents of students is a big constituency, but it's also, if it goes to referendum, it's not just parents and students voting on it, it's every taxpayer who doesn't have students in the schools as well. So those are all factors to consider, and there's been some referendums that didn't work, and whether that's indicative of, people not wanting referendums at this stage of the game, we don't know. We really don't know. And if everyone wants it, it's worth asking. I don't know.
But they're asking for like almost 4 times as much money.
Total, yeah.
Totally
And there's different
scenario. It's
circumstances.
like a Ferrari versus
Yeah.
a Honda. You know what I mean?
Well, part of the
So-
biggest failure of local referendum was the fact that there wasn't the buy-in by the community. So the community went ahead and said, we want X, and the board and the person that was in charge at the time said, no, we're gonna do this, and they thought that they'd have no problem because it's about kids and you're gonna support it, and it's good for your, for your property values and all that stuff. And when you're raising taxes that much and how much it was gonna raise individual property taxes on homes, that's what the biggest problem is, and the buy-in. So if you sell it properly and you say, okay, this is what we need and why we need it, there'll be the buy-in. And if you don't try to go overboard on this and do something that doesn't need to be done, then you'll get the buy-in. And everyone wants the best for their kids, the property values, and these numbers are considerably better than what the numbers were for and what they wanted to do. So there was a couple scenarios here. You move into a neighborhood and say, okay, we're gonna knock this school down, we're gonna build another one by the other school, and the traffic issues, and not being able to walk to school, ride to school, take your kids to the neighborhood school you bought a house in, that was one of the huge factors, and the fact that they didn't listen to the residents. Say, no, we'll be fine with this scenario. Oh no. So like you said, they went from the Volkswagen, nothing against the Volkswagen, to like the Ferrari level of what they wanted to do. So they wanted it all. Now they're in the process of going back to the drawing board, and it's going to take years for them, and they're going to probably try to do little minor fixes. But if you want to do a referendum, you want to do it right, you want to make sure that there's complete buy-in. You don't want to go over there and fail. You'd rather do what you guys are saying, is that we don't have to go to referendum, and it's not going to be a huge burden, and we can do this and make it better. You'll get 100%, not 100%, but you'll get tremendous buy-in, and not only the parents, but the people that don't have kids in school.
I think there's been a lot of work that's clearly gone into this, and there's been a lot of discussion, and the architect and the finance side, it's been a lot. But if you look at it from a project perspective, we're just cutting the ribbon to start the race here. We're just lining up and getting our way. That's where we are here in this. We're really just starting to look at this. This is just getting it ready and teeing it up for everybody to talk about it as a community. There's going to be more board meetings. We're going to be looking for a lot more community engagement. The more people you talk to about this, the more people have an opinion about this. Whatever the opinion is, the better decision we can make.
I was gonna ask like from a procedural standpoint, you know, like we're just October 8th meeting, but like at what point, like will a decision be made so that then there's a timeline? I mean, I'm guessing my first grader will be at Sunset Ridge by the time they're moving ground on any, but I don't know.
I don't know.
Maybe
Yeah,
not.
we don't know. You know, if
So fast, maybe? Yeah.
It could be possible that,
Yeah.
that if there's a lot of community buy-in with, say, you know, a remodel but not a rebuild and more than a refresh, like one of those scenario 1, 1.5, or 2, and that could get voted on this school year, and then we have to, you know, bid out the construction and that sort of thing and get calendars going. But it could be when our kids are in third grade. it could be the year that's disrupted.
Well, you can follow Tiedemann policy, which is have more kids.
yeah.
That's a good question. Was there discussion about using the square footage of the park district to just move the park district elsewhere? Like to move their physical administrative offices maybe into town, especially with like the reconstruction of their parking building?
We have not talked about that, is what I'll say. But all I'll say is they have no money. So anything would be, we'd have to buy, is what you're saying, we'd buy the park district.
We own the gym, just the
We
gym.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking that we buy, so I went to Middlefork for a little bit, and when I was a kid, we didn't have, that was the fair. So we
Oh,
bought the
wow.
gym, this was the gym, this was also a cafeteria.
Yeah.
But then the park district program was all still here, just in the classroom, so I'm thinking, I don't know, there might be some leverage there, I don't know, there's probably so much complication with purchasing that government property, but I don't know if the square footage is there, how many people would be able to use that gym.
Yeah,
But-
and I think, not speaking for them, but you know, the challenge is that that's their whole, everything is there. Their fields,
Right.
their, you know, all their
Right.
stuff is there. So I don't know what their motivation would be, but I think that's a what
I'm
if.
just thinking out of the security perspective of like that.
Oh, honestly, I would be 100% in favor of that.
With a referendum, do businesses get taxed as well, or just the
Oh,
residents?
yeah, it's spread across everyone. It's
So
one of
Medline
the,
would be all in on it.
it's one of the benefits of, you know, I love saying, tell me if I'm wrong, Tom, go look. We have the lowest tax rate of any school district in the New Trier Township.
All right, and that feels like a good sales pitch right there.
And yeah, and I would love to say that, you know, the truth of that is I think it's highly influenced by the fact that a big percentage of the tax burden gets eaten by Medline. That's an accurate statement.
Well, the key of the outreach, education, and buy-in, I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
Absolutely.
Outreach to what you're doing, is having community meetings, buy-in, and the numbers are very palatable, and that's the difference. And if you go in between 1 and 2, or 2 and 3, or whatever you decide to do, or we decide to do, that's gonna make the difference. And the numbers aren't staggering like they were at Middlefork and Bowl, and that's what we shut that down.
Well, I don't want to keep you here tonight. Anything else that's on your mind that you'd like to share? Things you liked about what, you know, needs, options, financing, things that you would like to see, things that you don't understand, or what ifs?
Quick question about, we're talking about the referendum, do we have data on like how property values increase with Sunset Ridge? Cause I think that might be good data points to like, for the,
Yeah.
for the community as you're talking about the value of the referendum. And if they did any research at that point on how the referendum is going to be received by the community, that you guys are getting to that point.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion to look at that. I think it's hard in, you know,
It's changed.
correlation, or, you know, what's causal, what's correlational, but, I mean, our enrollment certainly has gone up. Our enrollment has certainly gone up, since that school was built. And so, you know, again, I don't even know if that's the cause because of the school, or as was referred to, I think we do have a cyclical thing where when I came here 20 years ago, I knew all these families that had been here, and now all their kids are grown up and they moved out and they're in these big houses and they sold the houses. And who they sell them to? Families with little kids. So now you have the cycle coming back over again. Is it because we built a new school? It's hard to separate those things out, but I think it's good you have to have some data on that. Anything else? Mangini, come on. You can ask as many questions as you want.
The cost that you guys have projected, how tied to time is it? Like, if we take a year or two to make up our mind, are these costs gonna go up? What's the percentage?
So we did build some time into the cost, and just to take a year, we escalated these costs to 2026. These costs will be about 2026.
I'm assuming costs will continue to go up.
They do.
There's
Never
never.
Unfortunately.
And you can just see, that, 45 million, if that was 30 million 8 years ago, something like that, 9 years ago, you can see what that escalation is gonna be. All right, if there's anything else you want to ask, feel free to stay if you'd like to walk around and see the school. We'd be happy to take it. If you wanna give your little sheet, you can just leave it at the end. I'm also gonna put, hopefully I'll be able to, with Mr. Newman's help, edit this video, just the presentation part with the sheet, put it out there to the community and say, fill in that sheet, and I know you can submit it anonymously, so I don't even know who you are. But two last things is, you can always, and if you talk to a neighbor or friend, somebody in the community, under the Board of Education drop down on our website, to communicate, there's a link on there, and it's anonymous. So you can go on that and say, hell no, don't do a referendum. And nobody's gonna see your email. Or you can say whatever, and you can upload your thoughts on this to the board. My point is, I would love for you to say, hey Ed, I don't like this, and just stand behind it. But if you don't feel comfortable with it, I understand that. There's a way to anonymously communicate your thoughts on this is one thing. And then the last thing is, if this is something that you'd like to be involved in, I'm sure the board's gonna be looking for some community members to sit on a committee as we kind of vet this a little bit more. If that's something of interest to you, just give me a call, shoot me an email, and say, hey Ed, I might be interested. I'm not gonna hold you to, you gotta come to 10 meetings, 5 times a month, but you say, I might be interested, shoot me an email. I appreciate you taking the time to come here tonight, thank you so much. And again, we'll stick around. We'll stick around if you have any questions or comments or want to tour.